What's up, YouTube? Eric here from MajorLeagueTrading.com, coming at you guys with a breakdown video here on a trade that I took where I was long Nasdaq, short Russell, and this was a pairs trade. And what's really cool about this trade is it actually ended up working out. Both long and short were positive here, and I did it in a combination way where I traded the QQQ and the IWM, and then I also used micro futures. So this is a good strategy. This setup is a good strategy for even smaller accounts as well, because there's a couple different ways you can play it. Now, this trade has set up over the past few months. It's set up at least one time every single month, and then it lasts for about 2 days, and it's gone. So let's dive into the charts here and take a look at this, and I'll show you guys what I'm doing and how I'm tracking this trade to see it, and then how I ended up playing it here, again, using QQQ, IWM, and then the micro futures as well. All right, so what we're looking at right now here is a chart of the QQQs, and what I want to first kind of point out here is every day I do this thing called a morning write-up. And you can see this is the one from the 9th, which would have been Monday. And then we've also got the one from the 10th here, Tuesday, yesterday. Now, every morning I track basically what the percentage change is for each of the indices. And the reason I do this, well, one way I do this is I have a daily plan sheet. So all of these things you guys can get in the description. There's links in the description below. But one of the reasons that I put this percentage change here into my daily plan sheet that I use to do this write-up that you're seeing is that it allows me to see which of the indices, S&Ps, Nasdaq, Russell, and Dow, are the strongest or the weakest on the day. And that tells me, like, okay, if Nasdaq's stronger and we get some relative strength out of something like an Apple or an Amazon, and it meets the criteria and things like that, then that's a trade that I would like to take, and vice versa to the downside as well. So one thing you'll notice here, the Nasdaq and Russell here, Nasdaq was up 1.26%. The Russell was locked limit up 7% coming into the day, which is something that I've never seen before out of a broader index like that, being lock limit up 7%. So this was about a 6% move, 6% difference here between the two, and that was on Monday. And this was day one of watching this kind of unfold. And again, remember I've said it lasts about 2 days so far this year, every single time it's set up, which has been at least once every single month. Now, we go over into the 10th here, and which was Tuesday, yesterday, and this is when I put this position on, and I watched it throughout the whole day. You could see Nasdaq here was down 1.47%, while the Russell was up 1.83%. So that's a little bit over a 3% difference in price between those two. Now, the Russell ended up gapping up even more than 7% because it was lock limit up and ended up opening even higher than that at the actual 9:30 bell. So there was about a 10% price difference between these two indices in the way that they've moved Monday and Tuesday. So the way that I played this, okay. So if you take a look here, you can see how today unfolded, and this is what I want to show you guys. If we're looking at today, we can see that the Russell here is up 0.27% on the day, and the Nasdaq is up 2.47% on the day. So this came in by about 2.1% today. Now again, it's moved 10% over the past 2 days essentially, and today it came back in by a little over 2% on the day. Now, the way that I played this, and again, something I want to point out here is that the two ways that I played this, I tried to keep them notionally equivalent, right? Like if you take a look at the QQQ, it's priced at $290. If you take a look at the IWM, it's priced at $173. So obviously we can't just trade 100 shares of one and 100 shares of another and expect that to work out. So the way that I traded this here is I did the math and I figured, okay, it's 70 shares of the Qs for every 115 shares that we would want to be short of the IWM. So this trade, and you could do it 7 shares and 15, or whatever, any variance of that number. And it uses, at that number, it uses about $20,000 in capital in order to make this trade. Now, here's one way that I've reduced capital, and I was almost forced to reduce capital because the IWM is actually hard to borrow, which you can see here when I type this in. You can see this HTB up here is hard to borrow, so I can't actually go in and short 115 shares of the IWM. Now, when I went to put this position on, I didn't know that, so I had to do a little workaround. So here's what I did. I stepped in yesterday towards the end of the day. I punched this into the Discord as well, but I bought 70 shares of the QQQs here at 283, basically 80. So 283.80s on that. And then I went ahead and sold that today. If you notice, we got a really nice run up here in the morning for QQQ, and that was rallying right into my resistance level here of 817 on the Nasdaq futures. So when that happened, at the same time, at, whatever time this was, right before 10 o'clock on the day, the IWM was just dropping right down into, my support levels, which were coming from the Russell here. So, or the RTY, the futures here. So what I ended up doing here, which is 1729. So let me get back to this. So what I ended up doing here was buying 70 shares of the QQQ here, and then flipping those 70 shares out up in here. So you can see that trade. Placed it here, sold it here. And it was good for $334.03 on the day. I don't know what the actual, you can do the math on this for 70 shares. Difference of like a little less than $5 there on that. So I did that. Now at the same time, I couldn't short the IWM. So what I did is I stepped in and I bought 2 of the 174 puts for $2.78, which you can see right here. So this trade took me, 278. So it took me like $556 in capital in order to make this trade, as opposed to actually shorting the IWM, which again was hard to borrow and I didn't have it. Now, because that move was so drastic on both of these, the Qs and the IWM, I was actually able to make a little bit of a profit here on the IWM, which is 278. So I made like 17 cents per contract here, so 17 times 2. So I made $34 minus commissions on this part of it. And then on the QQQ side, I was able to make $334 and change. It's a little bit different because it shows part of closed day. That's P&L for the day. The P&L open would have been a little bit different since I did place the trade yesterday and closed it today. And this was taking about $13,000 in buying power in order to do this. And if we take a look here, I took a screenshot just before $14,000 in buying power. Just before I closed these positions out here today, I took a screenshot of the QQQ. This is that position here. So 14,000 and some change in buying power for this trade. Now, 288.35, and you can see I got out 288.19s. So by the time I took a screenshot and did all that and pushed the buttons, closed everything out, that's how that ended up working out. Now, so that's one way of doing it. If I wanted to reduce capital in this trade, I could also look at buying some QQQ calls, just like I did with the IWM puts, and that would have had the same effect. Again, the way that would have had to work is I would have looked for getting about a 70 delta QQQ call, or maybe 2 like 35 delta QQQ calls, something like that. So it ended up working out. Now, if you don't know what delta is and options and all those things, it's basically just the stock equivalent of that. So my short delta on the IWM was actually minus 114 because the put that I bought was a little bit in the money. So I got really close to my 115, my 70 to 115 ratio that I wanted there with this particular trade. Now, the other way that I also traded this year is in the micro futures. So I haven't traded these very much. They're a smaller product here, but the micro futures are essentially the same thing as the mini futures. They're just a tenth of the size. So it's still trading futures on, the S&Ps, the Nasdaq, Russell, Dow, all of those things, but they're just smaller in size. So I did the same thing here, and I ended up waiting until I waited for the after hours for this trade. And the reason being is that I wanted to see this kind of start to work a little bit in the after hours. I thought, okay, if this trade is going to start to work out after 2 days, like it has consistently throughout this year, then what I'm going to do is wait for the after hours trade, let it start to, you could say widen, or you could say come in a little bit, the spread difference here, and then I'll go ahead and place the trade. So this had already started to move by about 0.2% when I put this position on, and it showed me like, okay, hey, the Nasdaq is potentially going to get a little bit stronger here, and the Russell either not rally as much or stay a little bit weaker. So I want to go ahead and put this position on. Now I did get a little bit, kind of lucky with how that ended up working out, because I got in right before this big pop here. Now, at the same time, you could also argue that I held through this pullback, but at the same time, the Russell at the overnight session wasn't quite getting that pullback, right? So this position was at some point in time last night against me here, but again, it's hedged for the most part. Again, now it can obviously widen 10% like we saw, but again, I didn't expect it to go too far against me to where I wouldn't be able to manage this position. Hopefully all of this is kind of making sense there. So what I ended up doing here, again, is stepping in, buying 3 contracts of the micro futures for at 11,619, call it 11,620, and then I got out of those today at 11,812 and a quarter. Again, my resistance level was 11,817, and I ended up taking a screenshot here of this one as well, right as it was running up into those levels, and you can see here this trade used a little over $11,000 in buying power. So 7,080 and 4,075, so a little over $1,100 or $11,000 in buying power here. And with the way that this trade worked out, you can basically take 1154 minus the $16 loss there. So it was good for about $1,138 on the day and on the overall trade, considering that this one I did put on after the 6 o'clock market open there for futures. So this is a trade setup that you could also look for if you're trading the micros in after hours if you have a normal 9-to-5 job, and you can do essentially the same type of trade here that I did using the futures, because they open up at 6 o'clock Eastern and then trade all the way until 4:15 p.m. Eastern close. So there's a Globex session where they trade overnight. So that's the breakdown for this trade. That's how I'm tracking it and how I'm watching to see when it sets up, is using my daily trade plan sheet, recording those percentage changes each day, and kind of seeing how those spread, open up, and then looking for this type of trade, this pairs trade with a little bit of a reversion to the mean. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Overall, good for, I don't know, like $1,400 on this trade. I used $11,000 in buying power for the futures. I used about 14,000 and some change buying power when I did the QQQ and the IWM. And again, like I said, this is also a trade you can do in smaller accounts by utilizing the options in the QQQ, for example, if you didn't want to lay out, the $14,000 in capital for that trade. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope it's a new little strategy you guys can add to your trading arsenal. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comment section below. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm going to start putting out more content on here. And give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. As always, take care. Hope it helps. And I'll see you guys on the next video.